Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everyone for tuning in tonight. We are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And you are listening to Studio A, and my special guest this evening is Dr. Richard Alan Miller. Author and researcher Dr. Richard Alan Miller reveals a depth of knowledge and experience in alternative agriculture, physics, and metaphysics. Miller began working in the secret world of Navy Intel, SEAL Corp, and then MRU in the late 60s, and now has amazing experiences and conclusions to share. Before many leading-edge concepts became trendy topics, Miller was and is in the international front lines of research, experimentation, and documentation. His website is www.richardalanmiller.com. And with that being said, please welcome Richard Alan Miller to the show. Hi.
Hi there.
How you doing?
My stock response is that I'm going bald.
Aww.
Unnatural causes.
I love your laugh.
Well, if my research, and I have no idea what I'm doing, I do this for a living where I try to connect dots, and they've dumped a bunch of them in front of me. And it's very weird because guess what? The dots, the way you connect them, are arbitrary. That's why they call it five-space.
Mm-hmm. Right. And with that being said,
start you off there.
With that being said, let's get into you and where you're at and what you've been up to this past year.
Okay. What would you like to know?
Well, what projects are you working on right now? Let's start with that first of all. Anything exciting?
I've got the first thing I do is I try to stay current. So I have a bunch of lead scouts that are constantly sending me links that I check out, and I create diaries like the one you got just a few minutes ago. And I do that every day. That's kind of like a magical memory. It's like a diary where I keep really important thoughts that I've connected something with something else. You'll notice like on the one I did on the 25th was on geoengineering, where that creepy study went. It's when we talk about things like geoengineering, this is not a military operation. I'm military, and this is not military. Okay, who's doing it? Well, the vector leads to the United Nations, and there are 5 transnational corporations that are funding it. It's a lot of money. Why are they doing it? Well, I don't know. And if I don't know, what does that suggest?
Exactly. Well, that's pretty creepy.
Feels like we've been invaded or something.
Well,
literally.
Yeah, and haven't you mentioned something about the chemtrails having some kind of a nanotechnology?
Yes, they do. And it's a polymer that was originally, some of that first came out this last year when it snowed in the Midwest and the snow caught on fire. How does that work? And it has things in it mostly explained to capture water vapor, like they would in, climate control around an airport. But this has a polymer that has been injected with a bacteria. That bacteria is an unusual bacteria that somehow holds water in stitches or little curvature points. You know how water likes to curve and the structuring of it? Well, this thing somehow and it's activated by uranium. Okay, so there's 3 items in that, in the snow now, or the water, or the chemtrails that are being breathed by all of us. And in the 70s, in the labs that I worked in, I was out of the University of Washington in anesthesiology. And there was a guy named Delgado that was in the lab next to mine doing chip implants. This is before he went off to Yale and started doing more of his work. And then even at that moment, we were trying to look for a chip neuron interface, how to interface an external piece from outside, nanotechnology, with the brain. And then if we could somehow have that be like a chip, there you go. And so what we had, by the time I left the military there, we had a site-selective molecule that could be put in drinking water and would go anywhere in the brain that you wanted to. How you activated it might be with microwave. Okay, now, that was in the 70s. Okay, where are we today? And it's not a military operation, so just exactly what is it? It's global warming. That's the excuse. But today, just in my latest research, you'll notice that there is, from the sciences now, this weather pattern craziness that we've had this last year has actually stopped minutely global warming. It actually has. There is now it's actually working, kind of thing. But that's nothing that we know is real. That I guess what I'm going to try to say is, from a metaphor point of view, World War III is being fought right now on the internet, and the weapon is called information. And it's being used like spin or counterintelligence, lying by omission, by misdirection, where there's so much information flooding in conspiracy that all of it is put off on the side of, oh, that's not possible. However, in one of my books, I quote when Merlin said it succinctly to Arthur. He said, anything not specifically forbidden is mandatory. That means if it's possible, you can count on it. And my research on the geoengineering right now would suggest that this is a nanotechnology that we do not yet have, that somehow does a brain-mind interface. So if you were an alien and wanted to hide in plain sight, where would you hide? In the genes of your body, blood. And so the general consensus is that we were invaded about 200,000 years ago, and what made us, quote, God's favored, is that we have a choice. A battle that's going on in all of us right now. And so my mission statement is around children, because I'm not going to be able to save this world. And it's certainly my children are not going to save this world, but my grandchildren are. And they are going to learn how to do it by you or me getting off the couch and starting to walk the talk. And that's where it starts.
I so agree with that. And do you have records? You must obviously, besides your books, you have archives and you keep diaries of your data. So when you do leave this world, there's a legacy involved, right?
I've got a time machine.
Cool.
I've got it, Curtis.
Can I have it?
I'm not even born yet. Did I mention leave this world? Yeah, actually, the physical plane is most likely where we go to be sick spiritually. And the whole thing we're experiencing in the physical world is fever. That's probably a pretty accurate metaphor.
Right. Yeah,
everybody here has got, and everybody's aware of their problems. They don't want to address them, or they don't want to notice them. But in fact, everybody gets it, what I'm saying, everybody. And so what you have to do now is determine, how did that one person put it? Oh, an honorable person is someone that would do it when nobody's watching. That was when Ducky Mallard in NCIS said, what is the difference, when he responded to what is the difference between a moral man and an ethical man? An ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. It's time to start to take responsibility for our own personal behavior, actions, beliefs, thoughts we choose to entertain. Whether they came from us or they came from somewhere else, it really doesn't matter. What matters is the controlling of those thoughts inside your mind, because, in fact, that's what's structuring the water. It's up against organs, it promotes and gives you health. And if you're sick and are into some kind of self-destruct form, then there it is.
Yep,
that's
absolutely.
how it works.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's basically we manifest at will our own reality, and you're right.
That is correct, and we have to take responsibility for the thoughts we choose to entertain. Now, doomsday and apocalypse are part of the numinous. They're part of the collective unconscious. Joseph Campbell that said, when you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential. The bottom line is, it is part of man's belief systems, and so there will always be an element of mythology. Zen Gardner and some others are writing about the optimistic parts of being able to change the movie. That's what I'm writing right now. The book I'm writing is called The Non-Local Mind in a Holographic Universe, or How to Change the Movie.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, you're changing the scenery, and I'm a firm believer in that. Well, you know, for so many centuries, it's been manipulated and created for us. You know, a lot of this.
Well, that's what the Zeitgeist movement would suggest, you know, and the idea of religion being a structure of belief systems that would funnel us. I have this wonderful slide in my PowerPoint that shows the ape evolving into man and down into a sheep. That's exactly what we're doing. You know, with Common Core and the concepts of our educational system today is to take the one thing that makes mankind unique is his or our diversity, and to stamp it into making all of us similar in terms of social setting is like losing sight of the forest through the trees.
I so agree with that. Well, you need to have a symphony. You need to have harmonics. You know, each one vibrates at a different frequency, if you ask me. But, yeah, I don't like that whole thing of cookie-cutter civilizations. I don't think there's much of a benefit to that.
When I was in Mexico, I actually saw several of the ruins that are there at pyramids and in Chalupa and then down further south. And there were societies down there in deep Mexico that were more advanced than New York City. I saw it. And under it, because of my experience with the military and bunkers, I could feel that there was something even below that. And so I think civilizations have been here for a very long period of time. I have no idea what Atlantis was, but I know about Greece. It's gone. And now I'm watching Japan with Shogun and Ronin, and how Japan will no longer exist as a continent sometime in our lifetime.
Yeah. Have you actually remote viewed that, or what technique are you using to perceive that information?
Physics. We use remote viewing. Yeah, well, give me some drugs.
Okay.
No. That's if you want to talk about remote viewing, I have some deep opinions about that because I was there when Monroe was doing Journeys Out of the Body. I'm that old, and there is a difference between the 70s and the 80s. Russell Targ and those people, Pudov, started that project in the early 80s at SRI, but in the 70s, we were doing astral projection. The difference is that astral projection is coming from the inside out. It's you with a cord that gives you that connection between you and yourself. And remote viewing is actually a form of PK phenomena. And the bad news is that when something is observing something, it changes it. That means it's from the outside observing you. And so there are papers written on this. If you go on the internet, there's a zine called Emergent Mind Bulletin with Leon Sidorov. She's the editor of the Russian. And Maddie Pitkinen and Alex Kavarenin, excellent physicists, have written extensively about this specific thing and the dangers of remote viewing to be distinguished from astral projection. And today, in laboratories, what they'll do is strap them down in a chair and enhance it with drugs.
Yeah, now, that's unfortunate.
Well, it means that there's something creepy watching you, and changing you. And that's like your soul and things like that. So that is why I sense there's something else going on here, in like blood types and the draconian families of Europe.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you say it changes you, how does it change you? Does it alter the DNA? Does it create an altered personality?
Yes. All of the above. Yeah. Yes. I don't know. When I say I don't know, it depends on which kind of a model for a universe you're going to use. If you have a quantum universe, that has a set of rules and solutions that are uniquely different than if it's a holographic system, which deals more on information rather than space-time. With space-time and quantum systems, you're dealing with indeterminacy. That means the more you know about one thing, the less you know about another. And that suggests that there's only certain levels of awareness that you can reach with a quantum universe.
Right.
Whereas in a holographic system, you're dealing with resolution of information. And so it's different than quantized, like a fractal in a Mandelbrot generator will be if it's at a certain size, let's say 3 inches. The next one, quantized, will be at 6.4 inches, not 7.2. And so, and I'm using that as a metaphor so that there are a scaling relationship of the physical, emotional, intellectual, archetypal. Those are the first 4 planes that take you to yourself. And there are 4 further planes that Timothy Leary suggested in his neurologic circuits. And if you use that as a model, the actual neurotransmitters that are associated with those states like ketamine, actually the physical structure of it determines how information folds into or out of itself. And that's what makes the uniqueness of these neurotransmitters is their geometry.
Right. Well, I'm a firm believer in the holographic universe. And then, insofar as the drugs go, like even LSD, now that would be a DNA opener, right?
Okay, lysergic acid amide is different than lysergic acid diethylamide. You spoke of LSD. When you take LSD, your body freaks out because it sees it as a toxin. Mm-hmm. That LSD is actually broken down and into the urine probably within 20 minutes of ingestion. And the next 20 hours of response is a response from your own brain generating a similar chemistry like lysergic acid amide. And that neurotransmitter is the one that connects dots when you go, aha. When you go, aha, that actual schism is the release of lysergic acid amide. And if you can learn how to regulate the release of these different neurotransmitters, now you're performing what I would call 21st century magic. Mm-hmm. Magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. Right. And if your neurotransmitters are at one level in the physical plane, the way the information scales in memes, going from a physical to emotional plane. And that's why it's not incorrect to say that emotional intelligence is a higher level of information than the physical IQ.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And also, it's almost a form of alchemy with the way you describe it. So it is a form of internal alchemy through consciousness, would you say?
Well, that's okay. And I've written a book called The Modern Alchemist on Jungian psychotherapy. That's what I trained SEALs with. Mm-hmm. And basically, it's a metaphor, working with archetypes or a higher level of information, archetypal level, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if you can identify what you're doing in terms of mythology, you know how it ends. Is that how you want it to end? Or do you want to change the myth?
That's part.
And Jungian psychotherapy, they would say that you're either possessed, one God working through you, or you're complex, which is more than one God. So you can't have it either way, man. You're either possessed or complex. And once you've got that, now you have a better sense of your relationship to self down here on the physical plane. Its ego is probably the survival tool that makes you lonely, separates you from me, whereas you and I are the same at the holographic level.
Right. Yeah, I believe that also.
But yeah, what they call the collective unconscious or whatever. This is just a way of looking at things. This is not the way the world works. What it is a model that then has solutions on what you can and can't do in that universe.
Right, and to me it seems limitless.
Well, you have no idea. Yes, 5 space. What color hair do you want? You can do it gently, the one, and go for it. Well, that's basically one metaphor of solution. In the 70s, I suggested that the DNA, a hologram. Okay, you need a definition. A hologram is n dimensions of information in n minus 1 dimensions. That's demonstrated by fractal physics. And so it generates out of itself in terms of resolution of the information. A thing gets either bigger or smaller, and it's the same thing. Okay, it's the same thing. Now, that's in a holographic universe. That means that every space and time are simply connected and do not exist in a holographic system. And I suggested that the DNA was a three-dimensional hologram of four space: who you were, who you are, and who you will be. If that works as a model, then the brain is like a big crystal sitting on top of an antenna because it's amorphous semiconductor. It's constantly in flux change with your temporal lobes and the piezoelectric crystals up there. And as such, the brain could be said to be a four-dimensional hologram of five space, predicated on where you go, the places in the brain. Most saints have talked about meditation as a bliss state. Bliss states have certain specific neurotransmitter functioning, and that's Persinger and others up in Persinger up in Ottawa, and they did a lot of studies on the difference between our brain and, let's say, somebody that's meditating for 30 years. What I did was I learned how to use physics, toys, gadgets, gizmos, enhancements, drugs to enhance and change consciousness, where magic is a art of changing consciousness at will. Now, with that thought, that means that as alchemy has led to chemistry, now physics will become magic. Magic is like 21st century physics with a mystery school.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, totally.
Sorry about that, Solaris. You got to manage me. Tell me where you want to go.
Oh no, we're everywhere because that's where I want to be right now. So yeah, we're just running with the energy and yeah, no, this is perfect. Sure. But I do have a question for you. Now this is old school stuff, but I know you're familiar with John Lilly's work with dolphins, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so what's your...
Actually, I have. I was the guy that went into his labs for Carl Sagan.
Nice. Well, how did I know that? So can you elaborate a little bit on the what happened?
Well, okay. So he had done his Day of the Dolphin, and everybody wanted to know, well, does that mean that dolphins are intelligent? And Carl Sagan hired me to do the language of the dolphin. I was there in Berkeley for 10 days. And I mapped out the clicks and whistles of the dolphin and found that it was a form of Clifford algebra, dimensional math. They had a language that is more efficient than Hebrew by a factor of 10. And if you want more information on that, Avram Moles, who is a French mathematician, has written a book that's finally now in English called Aesthetic Perception and Information Theory. And it will talk about redundancy coefficients in language in the way you would burst or package information in sound. And with that said, their language was a form of Clifford algebra. I could not believe it. I stepped back and I looked at the dolphin, and I realized that this might be a mammal that was more evolved technically than man. And that led to a new series of things called cybernetic anthropology, which basically suggests that technologies have certain kinds of form appearances because we have a thumb and fire. But if you didn't have a thumb and you did not have a fire, what would technology be? And I couldn't believe what I was seeing with the dolphin. That little thing they do with a sonar, it's called sonoluminescence. They blow these little bubbles, and then they form them into shapes, usually rings, and they play with them, and so on. And then when they're finished, they let the ring go, and it pops to the surface as white light, which MIT has now identified as a form of cold fusion. And that's the dolphin's art form for play. And so I stepped back and realized, shoot, orca, who's higher on the food chain, because I've watched orca hunt dolphin, has a cerebral cortex that's twice the size of man That mammal is firing 60% of it. That would suggest that that mammal is going places man is not designed well enough to even comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 4 cetacean on this planet that actually have bigger brain cases than man. And now we're talking about elephants that have the ability to paint themselves with a self-imaging that's more aware than you or I. And then we have gorillas like Coco talking about an advanced being, God. Even mammals of that form have a sense of something more. That is caused by dimethyltryptamine, another neurotransmitter. That is why Rick Strassman calls that the God drug. It creates the sense that there's something more going on besides us, and is another level of realization within ourselves. There's going to be, I sent you a trailer on this new movie. Was it called Lucy?
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, man, does that look good? Where this woman finally, something happens to her, and she's able to use 100% of her brain. Mm-hmm. What happens next?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the sad thing is, it seems to me like the deployment of tactical hardware these days is designed to shut people's psychic ability down and also redirect the consciousness. Now, what's your take on that?
Try to retard evolution.
Yeah, exactly. So what's up with that?
Try to slow it down, keep it in control. Yeah, that's marketing and money. And money is like a theatrical prop. It's not real. What's real is your labor. And so I have some friends in agriculture, they're permaculturists, that have a thing called permacredit.com. Check that out.
Cool.
That's in North Carolina, where you girls are.
Nice.
Oh, you're not in North Carolina.
No. I'm in Colorado.
I've been all over the map this last couple of I mean, really, man. Save me.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you're all over the map. We need you everywhere.
Well, no. That isn't what I mean. It's like I sometimes forget myself. That's an Annie Lennox song. I love good singing. I love good voices.
Mm-hmm. I do too. And let's talk a little bit about your occult background too. I know you're a master of sorts. I mean, what are you not a master in really when it comes down to it? So
no.
No, seriously.
A master is a damn fool a long way from home.
Okay. Well, so how did you get involved in the occult? What year did that start?
When I came out of graduate school, of course, it's been part of my family, and so I've always been interested. But I'm a physicist, and so you're in, old studies and the good old time religion. The way you got to show me from Missouri, and I started with the Theosophical Society, and I remember I was very interested in magic. I went right straight to Crowley, checked out a couple of books, and I remember going home, and these 3 biddies from the Theosophical Society came to my door to threaten me on, the dangers of me studying Aleister Crowley. The next scene showed the 3 ladies running down the street screaming as I was chasing them with my... I know, I like to watch. Well, I started with the Theosophical Society. I started writing for Green Egg in 1970 with Tim and Morning Glory Zell. And I wrote for Llewellyn. At that time, Isaac Bonwitz had written a book called Real Magic. And it's got this one chapter, Black Magic, White Magic, and Living Color. I love it. It was, I've got a lot to say about all of that. I went through and became involved with the Ordo Templi Orientis, OTO, Order of the Temple of the Orient. My great-grandfather I'm a Swiss Mason. My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. There's a lineage. We're in Holy Blood, Holy Grail as the Nelson line. And that is why, even though I was a legacy, my father had to start training me in martial arts when I was 4 years old. I grew up in the Philippines and learned how to fight on the streets. My form evolved into 2 basics. I did Hangao, which is Northern Shaolin, and Pakwa, which was a Thai form. And I would switch it. When they figured out what I was doing, then I'd try to do it a little differently. I studied with John Leong, and even though as a legacy, they require physical representation. And right now, my title in that one lodge is I'm a Prince of Jerusalem. I'm a Knight of the Temple. And just, the lodge I belong to is 1480, was when it first started, and it was to protect the bloodlines of Christ. And it was my great-grandfather that said to Rudolf Steiner, he said, we are no longer at war in the physical world, that if we wish to change this world, we change ourselves and the world changes with us. It is about perception through your specific eyes. And each of us has to come to the table in order to stop this invasion.
I so agree with that. And how do you change the scenery that's been created by these puppet masters across the globe? That's one thing. I mean, to change ourselves and we change the world, I get that. But look at the display of illusion that's running rampant.
That's the whole thing about money. Just say no.
Opt out, right?
Well, here's the deal. If you shopped at Walmart, Walmart shopper got that one for me. And if 5%, not 10, if 5% of the people that shop at Walmart stop shopping at Walmart, that would close it down. It's as simple as that. People, when I was in Mexico, the Europeans that were there had 3 keywords they called Americans: ill-informed, ignorant, and complacent. It's our education. There is no role models. Even in Mexico, when I went by Mexico City, I've never seen anything like that. The poverty was 22 million people living on or near the streets in cardboard and whatever. Neighborhoods with walls and gangs armed, running. But what I also saw was that the children were happy and the family was still intact. That, I did see that too. And so that is what's wrong with America, is that we're going toward Mexico with a disparity of no middle class, and we have no family infrastructure. And that's why Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young teach your children well. That's where it's about. And it's walking the talk, and actually becoming a magician is only as strong as his word.
Very well said. I've heard that before, too, by the way, from other sources. That's really interesting. So when you were doing ritual, do you find it to be effective, your rituals that you've done in the past?
I started with, you mean 19th century?
Yeah.
19th century magic. And today, it's 20th century using hedron, geometry, sacred geometry, cymatics, whatever. Yes, I am into, today, 21st century magic. That's what I'm writing about.
Nice.
My systems have been used in Europe for more than 20 years. They're unpublished. The Holistic Kabbalah. You can find them on the internet. My ex-wife and I, she's CIA. We write about, path working and how to go from here to there. And the system I use seems to be giving me enlightenment.
Good.
Well, you tell me. I mean, you know my length, girth, and width. They're starting time I measure. Go to my shoulder and tie a knot. That's the place I'm at. And what I'm trying to do is, by divine right, get everybody to realize their potential. It's in the diversity of us. It's not that we're all the same and doing the same thing. That's why one of my teachers, told me that I'm not really supposed to talk about interplane experiences because I don't really want to contaminate someone else's form of experience. Each of us is different that way. We're all different, our relationship to self. And for me, if I'm asked, I'm allowed to talk, but I have to be asked. And the thing is, you don't want to mislead people because everybody's way of catharsis and centering in. I'm reading in Science News today, this morning, that addiction is not an illness. If you choose to look at it as a behavior that doesn't work well and it's sort of kind of self-destructive, all drug addicts pretty much can stop anytime they want to. So what does that mean? It's an illness and they've got the flu, need Betty Ford. I don't think it works like that. And that is the concept of taking responsibility. Mm-hmm. And, the way Steve Gaskins did it when he drew this circle on the blackboard. This was in a book he called Monday Night Class. I studied with him down in Berkeley. And he drew this circle on the board and he said, it may not be a perfect circle, but it's a perfect whatever it is. Everybody got it, Mm-hmm. It's like homeostasis. That we're not individuals. We're universes, each of us, like habitat. You're less than 10% human, and the rest of you is a bunch of bacteria, water transport processes, and some molds and viruses.
Yeah, that's true.
In fact, that's the truth of it,
mm-hmm.
which means you're like a universe. You're like a, unique universe with a little
mm-hmm.
bit of this and a little bit of that, and my hair fell out and yours turned black. Whatever. It's, it's like we're all of us uniquely different as homeostasis or balance. Now, you can change autonomic functions and autonomic function responses. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things, like belief systems. That's in my book. I talk about how to change a belief like you would a pair of clothing. And the concept of that is that if you were a staunch Christian and two aliens walked in the door, would you be able to see the aliens?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Your belief systems allow the reality of what can happen next and what can't. Mm-hmm. It's all happening, but your experience of it is extremely limited. In other words, you're not seeing reality, you're filtering it. Mm-hmm. And that's your belief systems, which basically turn out to be arbitrary when you really think about it. And so I have a pair of bell-bottom pants I'm never going to fit in again, but I'll never throw them away. Mm-hmm. And, your belief system, like Christianity, might be like that, where if you have to go into Iraq, your belief system might get you killed.
Right.
And so it's not appropriate. It should be used as a tool toward where your consciousness wants to go. And when you start thinking with your gut rather than your brain, now you're outside of space and time, and we call that ESP, but it isn't. It's thinking with your gut. It's part of the non-local mind relationship of the timeless part of self.
Right. Perfectly said. And, why do you think, and I know you've been involved in the early, MK Ultra programming, why was there a need to control, manipulate people's minds? I mean, what is really the benefit behind that?
You mean like the Borg?
Yeah.
This is futile. Give up now. Here, we'll give you a discount and you get another 10%. Good luck with that. That is the distractions of taking you away from your true will. And the way you know what your true will is that none will say nay. That means when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, the universe cooperates. Mm-hmm. There's nothing, including spooks, boogeymen, whatever, aliens, that want to stop that. And that's why you're here, is to make that discovery of intent. Mm-hmm. And good luck with that, because if you don't get it, you get to come back and be ill again. Mm-hmm. There's a movie that's about that. It's called Astral City. Mm-hmm. It's in Portuguese, and so there's English subtitles. It's about a doctor that watches himself die, and then what happens next. And it's interesting because the physical plane is kind of like spooky word. Everybody here is ill and doesn't see it. We're all whining. The guy, when he dies, pulls his head out from under muddy water with a breath of air going, and he looks around, and it's like Zombieland. Everybody is whining. Everybody's in pain. Everybody is miserable. It's pouring down rain. All of it. And what basically is, we're from the future, and we're here to be ill. Mm-hmm. That's a metaphor, of course.
Right. Well, it's like a floating asylum, if you ask me. I mean,
well, there you go.
you know.
And there's even Border Patrol and all of it.
Telling you. Well, yeah, I do understand what you're saying, but I do know that through the programming, it deters consciousness deliberately by some
the
of
way
the stuff
we're
they
born.
did.
That's again Steve Gaskins when he wrote Spiritual Midwifery and formed the farm in Tennessee. Basically, he was saying the way we're brought into this earth sets up a lot of our neuroses.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think? They take your baby away from you and fingerprint it and beat it up first. A bunch of thugs trying to make it cry and fingerprint it and no bonding with mother. Whereas, a litter of puppies and the way they mew with each other and nursing, it's why they're closer to spirit than we are. Mm-hmm. And that's what we see in animals that makes us so love them is like a wolf when it eats little Ralphie is not a bad wolf. He's being a wolf. Mm-hmm. That's what wolves do. And so doing what you're supposed to be doing, that is true will. Man does not actually have free will because that would imply that you had full disclosure. And guess what? We're only in 4th grade. I don't have a clue. And I know I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I see things that I've now determined may by definition not be knowable at any century. It doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a complex thought to hold and try to grok. It got an element to it of mystery school, like the way you would drive your automobile. You don't think in terms of how an internal engine combustion is working. You're going through sets of rituals with a key, turning the ignition, and da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. Have expectations on how that's going to reflect back in reality.
Right.
And, there it is. And that is a form of magic thinking anthropologically. That's the way Aborigines think. Mm-hmm. They don't need to know how something works to be able to have use for it. And so it's like physics with a mystery school. They know the water runs downhill, but da-da-da-da-da. They don't know why because they don't have gravity. Mm-hmm. Basically, they think the earth sucks. Just kidding. That's a little graffiti for us.
Oh, you're good. Correct me. I'm telling you. No, you're spot on about so many different topics. It's nice to just kind of go into different orbits with you about this information. And with that being said, with this world the way we see it, and I know you're working on this book and changing the scenery, which I find to be that's exactly what needs to happen.
Movie.
Well, it's a movie that really let me tell you, this is a movie that's a broken record at times. But is there any way to expedite that? I mean, I know you're going to put your book out and your book going to be out.
Flat iron skillet works. You hit them over the head with a flat iron skillet, everybody gets it. Meds. Right. I'm kidding. Well, no. Yes. When it's to learn how to use these altered states as tools, like we use consciousness. It's a gift to be paranoid and to tweak. Very rarely will you use those places. But if you know them, now you can use them as a manner of moving and changing and subtly. What you're looking for is what we call the flow. You have a long hallway, and you can ricochet back and forth on the walls, going down there where you wind this way, and I'm not going to do that bang that way. And that's called karma. And then the dharma part is when you find the track in the center where it's just smooth flow sailing. And that is where you're doing your true will. And what's happened is we have distractions. One of them is possessions. Like the more you have, the more imprisoned you are. Mm-hmm. So having things isn't necessarily a good thing. And so we've been led that we need those Nike shoes so that we can throw them up over the telephone line and mark our territory. But in fact, the only thing I know right now that I can take with me is my education. Mm-hmm. And so you can't get enough of that.
Oh, exactly. Well, it seems like your education would ascend in consciousness, right? And archive.
Oh, there you go. That's what we're talking about. Trying to move to other levels of relationship to the oneself, self-realization. And the problem I'm having with this invasion thing is that most of us have a 20-year program. Some, like myself, started projects 40 years ago, and now I'm having, finally, 40 years later, closures, like a book I started 40 years ago and it's done. I'm going to do 10 titles this year. I've been doing them. They're all going to happen this next year. Awesome. Now, with that said, what entity, not human, that would have a 120-year game plan? And when you realize that the king of the world, Rothschild, is of the 9 most wealthiest men in the world, 5 of them are Rothschilds, how does that work? And why they would also seemingly represent the least human aspects of what we would call human, like grace and compassion and love and those qualities that we deem as human, and yet they could rape the earth, fracking and whatever. It's a mystery for me. And so I'm realizing that money, as it is, there's a movie called Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which talks about we've had 400 years of currency, it doesn't work, it's time to move forward, barter, somehow have a different kind of an exchange system. And, I don't have answers on this, like Bitcoin and, all the different things that are happening. I have friends that are doing permacredits.com, which is basically farming, like community-supported agriculture. You invest in them, you get so much grocery back, that kind of thing. Now, Cornell has a project like that that's kind of cool. A graduate student will teach a laboratory, non-science laboratory, let's say, and given so many work credits, which he can now take into the town of Cornell and spend for food or lodging.
Nice.
Yeah. And that, I think, it'll be more local with what we call neighborhoods and semi-rural communities and the way they would barter one thing for another. And that's basically what I'm doing now is ex-military, retired. Actually, you never retire with what I do. I'm still, part of the program. But what I do now is I network rural communities and bunkers for congressmen. I, work with people like Dennis Kucinich and others that we're going into, communities and fine-tuning them so that they can interface and set up a networking if and when the grid goes down.
Right. So what is the pulse about the future? I mean, what is their take on what's going to happen in America? Anything you can talk about?
Well, we have worst-case scenarios. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that is an interesting question. Future maps of America, Chet Snow. The military uses the Chet Snow, not Scallion's map. We pretty much believe that that's the way the United States is going to look sometime down in the near future. When? Nobody has a clue. How? Nobody has a clue. Mostly, it's going to be the sun. That's with coronal mass ejections causing the earthquakes in Peru, whatever. That's with Fukushima. Fukushima, they at one point tried to say that it was intentional, and it was the sun that did it. But what made it a potential extinction event is that they had weapons-grade plutonium stored. They don't have spent fuel rods. It doesn't work like that. And so what was the weapons-grade plutonium there, and what was that all about? Well, who knows? And it's like the fish coming out of San Francisco is radioactive, and they say it's all from Fukushima. More likely, it's probably Hanford leaking into the Columbia River. And in other words, everything is so convoluted now that information has become a kind of weapon where there's so much of it, there's no way to truly know. What we do in the military for projections, we have algorithms, somewhat like Cliff High does. We don't use On's algebra like he does with, what's that guy's name? We do Ben Goertzel. We use a form of Clifford algebra again, And it's an algorithm that listens to and grabs chatter on the internet and then accurately predicts possible outcomes as a result of the chatter. And the way the chatter varies changes the algorithm. And right now, the chatter says that Fukushima is becoming an extinction event by the year 2050.
2050? Wouldn't you say it's earlier than that?
No, I'm saying that by 2050, everybody's going to be in serious trouble.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that at all. It sounds like a global sabotage.
Less than 30 years. And less than 30 years, 25 years. And that is military projections. Now, what is geoengineering? Why are they doing it? What is GMOs? What I feel like I'm being attacked in the water I drink, the air I breathe, and the food I eat. They're attacking me from all sides. So I wrote a technical paper that I delivered called The New Directions in Mind Control. I'm the one that did synthetic telepathy in the early mind war.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to take a break real quick. We'll be right back. Everybody stay tuned with Dr. Richard Allen Miller.